Welcome to Lost at 3 a.m. Put your phone down, close your eyes, and let this be the last video you hear tonight. Relax, breathe, and let's begin. Tonight, we're stepping into the chaotic, unfiltered, and endlessly hilarious world of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. A show that defies convention, ignores morality, and somehow, despite its characters' sheer awfulness, keeps us coming back for more. For nearly 2 decades, It's Always Sunny has pushed the boundaries of what a sitcom can be. It doesn't follow traditional formulas, it doesn't force character growth, and it certainly doesn't shy away from the absurd. Instead, it thrives on unpredictability, satire, and the unwavering narcissism of 5 of the most self-destructive people in television history. But how did this low-budget passion project become one of the longest-running live-action sitcoms of all time? What makes the gang so compelling, despite their sheer lack of redeeming qualities? And how has the show managed to evolve while still staying true to its chaotic core? Over the next few minutes, we'll dive into the origins of It's Always Sunny, break down its legendary characters, and explore why this show remains one of the greatest comedies of all time. For now, imagine yourself sitting at Paddy's pub. The neon sign flickers, the floors are sticky, and somewhere in the distance, you hear Charlie yelling about rats. Welcome to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Let's begin. Before It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia became a cult phenomenon, it was nothing more than a rough idea, a camcorder, and a group of aspiring actors willing to take a risk. Unlike most sitcoms backed by networks and big budgets, It's Always Sunny started as a passion project. Created by a few friends with no money, no studio backing, and no guarantee that anyone would ever watch it. It all began with Rob McElhenney, the show's creator and the man behind Mac. He wrote a script based on a simple but darkly comedic concept. What happens when a group of selfish, morally bankrupt friends run a failing bar in Philadelphia? The original pilot was shot on a budget of just $200, with McElhenney, Charlie Day, and Glenn Howerton filming in their own apartments using a handheld camera. There was no elaborate production, just raw, unfiltered humor and a willingness to push boundaries. FX executives saw potential in the project, but they suggested a key change, adding a recognizable name to the cast. Enter Danny DeVito. When DeVito joined in season 2 as Frank Reynolds, the show transformed from an underground experiment into a full-fledged TV sensation. His unhinged, unpredictable energy fits seamlessly into the world of Paddy's pub, cementing the show's identity. Even with DeVito on board, It's Always Sunny remained a different kind of sitcom. There was no laugh track, no sentimental life lessons, and certainly no redemption arcs. Instead, it thrived on fast-paced dialogue, controversial humor, and the idea that its characters would never change or learn from their mistakes. The show's DIY roots never disappeared. The core cast remained heavily involved in writing, directing, and producing, ensuring creative freedom and a consistency of vision. What started as a no-budget experiment became the longest-running live-action sitcom in US television history, all without compromising its chaotic, unapologetic humor. And that's the beauty of It's Always Sunny. It wasn't born in a Hollywood boardroom. It was built from the ground up by people who simply wanted to make something hilarious, fearless, and completely different. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. At the heart of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is the gang, a collection of 5 of the most self-absorbed, morally bankrupt, and hilariously incompetent characters in television history. They lie, cheat, manipulate, and betray each other at every turn, yet somehow their toxic dynamic keeps them together. Let's start with Mac. His full name? Ronald McDonald. But don't let that fool you. He takes himself way too seriously. Mac is the self-proclaimed muscle of the group, always flexing in front of a mirror or claiming to know karate, even though he's never won a fight in his life. He's deeply insecure, constantly searching for a personal identity, and clings to whatever ideology gives him the illusion of control. Whether he's obsessing over his abs, flip-flopping between religious devotion and hedonism, or desperately trying to impress Dennis, Mac is a delusional mess and completely unaware of it. Then there's Dennis Reynolds, who might just be the most terrifying character of them all. On the surface, Dennis is polished, confident, and articulate, but beneath that thin veneer of charm is something much darker. He's a textbook narcissist, obsessed with power and control, particularly when it comes to manipulating women. His infamous Dennis system lays out a step-by-step strategy for emotional manipulation, revealing just how unhinged he truly is. Whether he's having a meltdown over a scratched Range Rover or bragging about his golden god status, Dennis isn't just arrogant. He might be a full-blown sociopath. And then there's Charlie Kelly. If Dennis is a monster, Charlie is something closer to a feral raccoon in human form. He's the janitor of Paddy's pub, though calling what he does cleaning is generous. He can't read, writes nonsensical songs about spiders, and lives in absolute filth, surviving on a diet of cat food and something he calls milk steak. But for all his quirks, Charlie is weirdly innocent compared to the others. Sure, he stalks the waitress, huffs glue, and collects an alarming number of rats, but in some twisted way, he's also the most lovable of the bunch. Dee Reynolds, Dennis's twin sister, starts off as the voice of reason in the early seasons, but that doesn't last long. The gang never lets her have an ounce of dignity. They mock her relentlessly, compare her to a bird, and sabotage her attempts at success. But Dee isn't exactly a victim. She's just as conniving and cruel as the rest. Whether she's faking a disability for attention, gaslighting an entire room just to win a bet, or screeching in frustration as another one of her dreams crumbles before her, Dee is just as awful as the others. She just happens to be the easiest target. And finally, there's Frank Reynolds. Frank wasn't part of the original lineup, but when Danny DeVito joined the cast in season 2, he completely redefined the show. Frank is a former businessman who decided one day that wealth and respect weren't worth it, so he threw it all away to embrace his inner gremlin. Now, he's a revolting, gun-toting, trash-eating degenerate who spends his days crawling through sewers, huffing glue with Charlie, and bankrolling the gang's dumbest ideas. If there's a way to make a situation worse, Frank will find it. What makes It's Always Sunny unique is that these characters never grow, never improve, and never learn from their mistakes. In a normal sitcom, you'd expect a redemption arc or some kind of life lesson, but that doesn't happen here. Every time it seems like one of them might change, they immediately revert to their old ways, proving that some people are just irredeemable. And yet, despite their toxicity, we can't stop watching them. Maybe it's because they expose the worst parts of human nature, or maybe it's because, deep down, we all have a little bit of the gang in us. Either way, It's Always Sunny wouldn't be It's Always Sunny without these 5 disasters ruining each other's lives, one ridiculous scheme at a time. There's no sitcom quite like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. While most comedies follow a predictable formula, characters learning lessons, sentimental moments tying things together, Sunny throws all of that out the window. Instead, it thrives on chaos, satire, and an unapologetic disregard for morality. From the very beginning, the show made it clear that it wasn't interested in playing by the usual rules of television. There's no laugh track, no moral compass, and certainly no redemption arcs. The gang doesn't grow as people. They don't get wiser, kinder, or more self-aware. They only become worse, more delusional, more reckless, and more creatively evil. And that's what makes it so brilliant. The show's humor is built on dark satire and pushing boundaries. It doesn't just make fun of its characters, it exposes them. Their schemes often revolve around exploiting others, getting rich through illegal means, or proving some ridiculous point just to stroke their egos. But no matter how far they go, it always backfires spectacularly. Their plans don't just fail, they implode in the most absurd and humiliating ways possible. And unlike in other sitcoms, where characters might feel guilty or try to make amends, the gang just shrugs and moves on, completely unaffected. One of the things that sets Sunny apart is how it tackles controversial topics with pure absurdity. The show doesn't take political stances. It makes fun of everyone, regardless of their beliefs. It satirizes everything: religion, gun laws, politics, the entertainment industry, even the very concept of morality itself. But instead of making grand statements, it lets the gang, 5 of the worst people imaginable, navigate these topics in the dumbest, most selfish ways possible. And then there are the running gags. Few shows have mastered the art of the long-running joke the way It's Always Sunny has. From Charlie's illiteracy, to Mac's obsession with proving he's tough, to Dennis's chilling sociopathic tendencies, these jokes don't just appear once, they evolve over time. Even small, seemingly throwaway lines from early seasons come back years later in new and unexpected ways. The show also loves to break its own format, constantly experimenting with structure and storytelling. One episode might be a musical, The Nightman Cometh. Another might be a single-take tracking shot, Charlie Work. And another might be shot in the style of a classic sitcom, The Gang Does a Clip Show. There are even episodes where reality bends, time shifts, and we see events from multiple perspectives. This unpredictability is part of what makes Sunny so addictive. You never know what's coming next. But perhaps the biggest reason the show works is because it doesn't ask you to sympathize with its characters. It never tries to justify their actions, and it never expects you to root for them. Instead, it invites you to laugh at them, to watch them destroy their own lives over and over again in increasingly ridiculous ways. In a world where most sitcoms rely on feel-good moments and likable characters, It's Always Sunny dares to be different. It proves that sometimes watching truly awful people make absolute fools of themselves is the funniest thing of all. In most sitcoms, characters evolve. They learn lessons, face consequences, and, over time, become better people. But It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Absolutely not. One of the most fascinating things about Sunny is that after nearly 2 decades on air, the gang has experienced 0 personal growth. No matter how many times they fail, no matter how many schemes go horribly wrong, and no matter how much their lives spiral out of control, they never change. They refuse to learn. They refuse to reflect. And they absolutely refuse to improve themselves in any way. Take Dennis Reynolds, for example. If Sunny were a typical sitcom, Dennis might have had a redemption arc by now. Maybe he would have reflected on his manipulative, egotistical nature and tried to become a better person. Instead, he's only gotten worse. Over the years, his narcissism has evolved into something truly terrifying, as he refers to himself as a golden god and talks about controlling people like he's some kind of evil mastermind. The unsettling truth? He's completely serious. Then there's Mac, who has spent 15 seasons flip-flopping between identities. One moment, he's devoutly religious. The next, he's obsessed with martial arts. The next, he's convinced he's a genius. He constantly seeks validation, but no matter what phase he's in, he remains the same, insecure, desperate mess, even after coming out as gay, a moment that in any other show might be treated with real emotional weight. Mac still manages to make everything about himself in the most absurd way possible. Charlie Kelly? He should be in therapy. He should be in a facility. But instead, he continues to live in complete filth, huff glue, eat cat food, and sleep on a couch covered in who knows what. He's been hit by cars, locked in basements, attacked by animals, and put through unimaginable trauma, but none of it phases him. He just keeps going, completely unfazed by his own suffering. Dee might be the only member of the gang who genuinely wants to improve her life, but she is doomed to fail. Whether it's her acting career, her attempts at romance, or her desperate need for approval, Dee is constantly crushed under the weight of her own arrogance. Every time she thinks she's finally won, the universe, or more accurately, the gang, brings her crashing back down. And Frank? Frank has embraced his descent into madness. When he was first introduced, he was just a shady businessman who had a slightly looser moral compass than the others. But over time, He's fully given up on being human. He bathes in filth, eats discarded food off the street, and actively seeks out the most depraved experiences possible. If Dennis and Dee were hoping their estranged father would offer them some kind of wisdom, they were dead wrong. He's just as chaotic, if not worse, than the rest of them. The brilliance of It's Always Sunny is that the show teases the idea of character development only to rip it away at the last second. There are moments, small, fleeting moments, where it seems like maybe, just maybe, one of them is about to change. Maybe Mac will finally understand himself. Maybe Dennis will face consequences for his manipulative nature. Maybe Charlie will take control of his life. But then, everything resets. They go back to scheming, drinking, and ruining each other's lives. And that's what makes Sunny different. It isn't a show about personal growth. It's a show about what happens when people refuse to grow, refuse to change, and refuse to admit that they are, in fact, the problem. And as frustrating as that might sound in theory, in execution, it's absolutely hilarious. Most sitcoms are carefully crafted by teams of writers, directed by studio executives, and shaped to fit network standards. But It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's the complete opposite. From the very beginning, Sunny has been a show that refuses to play by Hollywood's rules. It was built on a DIY spirit, created by a small group of friends who wanted to make something their own way, without interference. That creative independence is what makes Sunny so special. Rob McElhenney, Charlie Day, and Glenn Howerton didn't just star in the show. They wrote it, directed it, and produced it. They had complete control, which meant they could take risks, push boundaries, and experiment with storytelling in ways that most network comedies never could. And they weren't afraid to get weird. Over the years, Sunny has reinvented itself time and time again, proving that it's not just a sitcom, it's a playground for bold, unconventional ideas. Some episodes are structured like classic farces, others take on the feel of a full-blown action movie, and some are so experimental that they break the very concept of what a sitcom is supposed to be. Take Charlie Work, for example. At first, it seems like just another day at Paddy's pub, but then the entire episode unfolds in a single unbroken take, following Charlie as he scrambles to keep the bar in order, while the gang unknowingly causes chaos around him. It's a technical masterpiece, unlike anything you'd expect from a show about 5 degenerates running a failing bar. Or The Gang Turns Black, an episode that plays out like a full-on musical, complete with Broadway-style numbers and a time-travel twist. In any other show, this would feel completely out of place. In Sunny, it fits perfectly. And then, of course, there's The Nightman Cometh, the most infamous episode of all. A fully staged rock opera, written by Charlie, starring the gang, and packed with nonsensical lyrics, off-key singing, and deeply disturbing implications. It's absurd, it's chaotic, and it somehow became one of the show's most beloved moments. But despite all this experimentation, It's Always Sunny never loses its identity. No matter how ambitious the format gets, the core of the show remains the same. It's still about the gang being the gang, still packed with sharp satire, absurd schemes, and hilarious failure. The reason the show has been able to evolve so much is because it has never been controlled by a traditional studio system. Unlike other sitcoms that are focus grouped, rewritten, and polished into safe, marketable entertainment, Sunny has always been raw, unpredictable, and completely authentic. And that's why, after nearly 20 years on the air, it still feels fresh. The show doesn't just follow trends, it reinvents itself, playing by its own rules and constantly pushing the boundaries of what a sitcom can be. Other shows might try to copy its style, but at the end of the day, there's only one It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and it's that fearless, no-holds-barred approach to comedy that has kept it alive for so long. Over the years, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has delivered some of the most absurd, unforgettable, and wildly chaotic episodes in television history. Every scheme, every argument, and every twisted plan. The gang hatches seems to spiral further and further out of control, leading to some of the funniest, most re-watchable moments ever put on screen. One of the most legendary episodes is the Dennis system, where Dennis lays out his meticulously crafted, deeply unsettling method for manipulating women. He explains it like a master strategist unveiling his grand plan, with complete confidence that his system is foolproof. The rest of the gang, instead of reacting with horror, actually listens, nodding along, taking notes, as if Dennis is some kind of genius rather than the deranged sociopath he so clearly is. It's a perfect example of how Sunny takes something dark, something no other sitcom would touch, and turns it into pure comedic gold. Then there's Charlie Work, an episode that isn't just funny, it's a technical masterpiece. Unlike most episodes, which descend into chaos, this one follows Charlie in a desperate, frenzied attempt to hold everything together. The entire episode plays out in a single unbroken tracking shot as he runs through the bar fixing mistakes, dodging the gang's reckless behavior, and somehow, against all odds, keeping everything from falling apart. For once, Charlie actually seems competent. Of course, by the end of the episode, it's all for nothing, because in Sunny, even when you try your hardest, failure is inevitable. There's Chardy McDennis, the gang's homemade board game, which isn't really a board game at all. It's a brutal contest of drinking, psychological warfare, and physical endurance. The game has no real rules. Everyone cheats, and by the end, someone is usually injured, humiliated, or crying. And yet, every time they play, they take it deathly seriously, as if it's a legitimate test of intelligence and skill, rather than just another excuse to torment each other. But beyond individual episodes, It's Always Sunny is packed with legendary running jokes that have become an essential part of its identity. There's Charlie's bizarre eating habits, including his favourite meal, milk steak, a dish no normal person has ever heard of, consisting of a steak boiled in milk and served with a side of jelly beans. There's Mac's ever-changing body image, as he swings from overweight to shredded, convinced that his physical transformation will somehow prove his dominance. There's Frank's deep, unshakable love for rum ham, an entire ham soaked in rum that he eats while floating in the ocean, mourning its loss like a fallen comrade when it drifts away. And then there's Dee. If there's one thing the gang agrees on, it's that Dee is not, in fact, a person. She's a bird. It doesn't matter how many times she protests, how many times she tries to assert herself. The moment she walks into a room, the insults start flying. She squawks, she flaps her arms, she gets compared to every species of bird imaginable, and no matter what happens, she never, ever wins. Of course, no list of Sunny running jokes would be complete without the waitress. Charlie's obsession with her is the most disturbing, longest-running, one-sided romance in television history. No matter how many restraining orders she files, no matter how many times she explicitly tells him she's not interested, Charlie refuses to take the hint. And yet, despite all this, the show never lets us sympathize with him, because as much as he sees himself as a romantic underdog, the truth is, he's just a full-blown stalker. And then there's Frank, who has so completely abandoned human decency that he trims his toenails with something called a toe knife, a rusty old blade he keeps next to his recliner. He's filthy, he's unhinged, and every year he seems to sink deeper into depravity, proudly wallowing in garbage like some kind of sewer-dwelling goblin. But what makes It's Always Sunny so brilliant is that these aren't just throwaway jokes, they evolve. Every time we see them, they escalate, becoming even more ridiculous. The more you watch, the more you pick up on tiny details, old jokes resurfacing in new, unexpected ways. And it's that kind of long-term payoff, that deep, ridiculous lore that keeps fans coming back again and again. At its core, It's Always Sunny is a show about failure. The gang will never change, their schemes will never succeed, and their dreams will never come true. But that's exactly what makes it so funny, because watching these 5 disasters fail over and over again is what makes Sunny one of the greatest comedies of all time. When It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia first aired in 2005, no one could have predicted just how much of a cultural phenomenon it would become. It wasn't an instant success, it wasn't a critical darling, and it didn't have big-name stars headlining its cast. But against all odds, this small, low-budget sitcom about 5 terrible people running a bar in Philadelphia has become one of the longest-running live-action comedies in television history. The secret? Sunny never tried to fit in. It didn't follow the traditional sitcom formula, and it never cared about being safe or digestible. Instead, it leaned into absurdity, satire, and complete creative freedom, giving us a show that feels raw, unfiltered, and totally different from anything else on TV. Part of what made Sunny so special was its ability to take geek culture's obsession with likable characters and completely throw it out the window. The gang is not likable. They are selfish, cruel, delusional, and sometimes outright dangerous. In any other show, these characters would be the villains. And yet, by making them so unapologetically awful, Sunny created a new kind of sitcom. One where the comedy doesn't come from heartwarming lessons or personal growth, but from watching deeply irredeemable people ruin their own lives over and over again. That formula resonated in a way no one expected. Over the years, Sunny has gained a cult following, with fans quoting its most ridiculous lines, reenacting scenes, and even turning the gang's terrible ideas into reality. Bars have actually tried serving rum ham. People have hosted real-life versions of Chardee McDennis, and of course, The Nightman Cometh, what started as a joke musical inside the show, became so beloved that the cast performed it live on stage to sold-out crowds. The show's influence has extended beyond comedy, shaping the way modern sitcoms are written. It proved that you don't need a massive budget or a traditional structure to make something unforgettable. It paved the way for other dark, irreverent comedies like Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman, and The Righteous Gemstones. Shows that embrace morally bankrupt protagonists and let their worst instincts drive the humor. But It's Always Sunny didn't just push boundaries in storytelling. It also made an impact behind the scenes. The fact that Rob McElhenney, Charlie Day, and Glenn Howerton created, wrote, and controlled their own show from the very beginning was almost unheard of in Hollywood at the time. They proved that independent, creator-driven projects could not only survive, but thrive. And then there's the longevity. In an industry where most sitcoms last a handful of seasons before running out of steam, Sunny has been going strong for nearly 2 decades. With over 170 episodes, it holds the record for the longest-running live-action sitcom in American history. And unlike many long-running shows that lose their edge over time, Sunny has stayed sharp, constantly reinventing itself without ever betraying what made it special in the first place. Its influence isn't just limited to television. The show's internet presence is massive, with memes, fan theories, and viral clips keeping it alive across social media. Whether it's Dennis's unhinged rants, Charlie's Pepe Sylvia conspiracy board, or Mac's dramatic I Get It Now dance sequence, Sunny moments have taken on a life of their own, far beyond the screen. And then of course, there's the fact that the cast has become household names. Charlie Day has gone on to star in blockbuster films. Glenn Howerton has led major TV projects. Caitlin Olsen has become one of the most respected comedic actresses working today. And Rob McElhenney? He not only transformed himself physically for the role of Mac, he also co-owns a Premier League football team, proving that the man behind the show's dumbest character might actually be a genius. At the end of the day, It's Always Sunny has done something truly rare. It has survived, adapted, and stayed relevant in an industry that chews up and spits out comedies every single year. And it did it without changing who it is. It didn't clean up its humor. It didn't try to make the gang more sympathetic. It didn't pander to networks or audiences. It just kept being Sunny. And that's exactly why it will always be one of the most important comedies of all time. At first glance, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia looks like a show that refuses to change. The gang is still selfish, still reckless, And still as depraved as ever, they continue to hatch ridiculous schemes, ruin their own lives, and somehow avoid any real consequences. But if you look closely, you'll see that over the years, Sunny has actually evolved, just not in the way you might expect. The show's early seasons were raw, almost DIY in their execution. The production was simple, the budget was low, and the humour relied heavily on dark, offensive satire. The gang was younger, louder, and even more abrasive than they are today. In those first few years, Sunny felt almost like an underground comedy experiment. Something completely unpolished, something that didn't care about traditional sitcom structure. But as the seasons went on, Sunny began to refine its chaos. The writing became sharper, the jokes became more layered, and the satire became more precise. The show stopped relying on shock value alone, and instead leaned into deeply absurd, well-crafted storytelling. It wasn't just about being offensive, it was about using humour to expose the worst parts of human nature in the most ridiculous ways possible. Even the gang's brand of stupidity evolved. In the early seasons, they were just ignorant, failing at life because they genuinely didn't understand how the world worked. But as the years went on, their stupidity became more deliberate. Now, they fail not just because they're clueless, but because they actively make the wrong choices, doubling down on their worst instincts at every opportunity. And then, of course, there's the biggest shift. The show became self-aware. Take Mac, for example. In the early seasons, he was just a typical meathead, constantly talking about how tough and masculine he was, even though he was completely incompetent. But as time went on, the show leaned into his contradictions, making his self-delusion even funnier. His obsession with proving his toughness reached absurd levels, whether he was cultivating mass by getting insanely fat or getting shredded for no reason other than projecting strength. And when Mac finally came out as gay, Sunny didn't handle it like a traditional sitcom. There was no sentimental arc, no big speech about self-acceptance. Instead, the gang barely reacted at all, treating it with the same careless indifference they give to everything else in life. But Sunny didn't stop there. In later seasons, Mac's identity struggles became a full-fledged storyline, culminating in the now famous scene where he performs an elaborate emotional dance routine to explain his feelings to his father. It's a moment that, in any other sitcom, would feel completely out of place. But in Sunny, it works because it's so unexpected, so completely out of character for Mac, that it makes perfect sense in the most bizarre way. The show also evolved in its visual style. Episodes like Charlie Work introduced ambitious, single-take cinematography that felt more like something out of a high-budget drama than a raunchy sitcom. Others, like The Gang Turns Black, experimented with musical numbers, while The Gang Makes Lethal Weapon 6 satirized Hollywood's worst tendencies in a way only Sunny could. But perhaps the most surprising evolution of Sunny is that despite its relentless commitment to depravity, it has subtly adapted to the modern world. In its early days, Sunny thrived on being shocking, throwing political correctness out the window. But as time has gone on, it has proven that it doesn't need to rely on controversy to stay funny. The humor is still dark, still ruthless, still unforgiving, but smarter. Instead of just being edgy for the sake of being edgy, the show now takes a sharper, more thoughtful approach to its satire. And yet, for all of these changes, It's Always Sunny has never lost its core identity. No matter how much the show has refined its humor, played with its format, or experimented with character arcs, the gang remains exactly the same. Selfish, destructive, and completely incapable of learning from their mistakes. That's the real genius of Sunny's evolution. It's not about personal growth, but about finding new, creative ways to keep the gang stuck in their never-ending cycle of failure. And after nearly 2 decades on the air, it's still doing exactly that, better than ever. After nearly 2 decades on the air, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has cemented itself as one of the greatest comedies of all time. It started as a low-budget experiment, a passion project between a few friends who had nothing but an idea and a camera. No executives shaping the script. No focus groups deciding what would work. Just raw, unfiltered, reckless comedy. And somehow, against all odds, it not only survived, but became the longest-running live-action sitcom in American television history. That alone is an incredible feat. Most sitcoms burn out after a few seasons, running out of ideas, losing their core cast, or becoming shadows of what they once were. But Sunny, it's different. It has never lost its edge, never softened its humor, never tried to make the gang more likable. It has stayed true to itself, evolving without ever compromising what made it special in the first place. And that's exactly why people love it. There's something liberating about a show that refuses to conform, a show that takes the idea of character growth and completely throws it out the window, a show where failure isn't just a running theme, it's a way of life. The gang will never change, never learn, never win. And yet, we keep watching, because deep down, we know that's exactly the way it should be. Beyond just being hilarious, It's Always Sunny has left a massive impact on pop culture. Its jokes, its characters, and even its most absurd concepts have taken on a life of their own. The Dennis system has become a meme. The Nightman Cometh is performed by fans all over the world, and Wildcard, B*Ches, is an immortal battle cry for anyone embracing pure chaos. And then there's the influence it's had on comedy as a whole. Before Sunny, sitcoms followed a formula: likable characters, heartfelt moments, a sense of resolution. But Sunny shattered that idea, proving that a comedy doesn't need good people, a moral compass, or even structure to be successful. It just needs sharp writing, fearless storytelling, and a cast willing to go all in on the insanity. Its impact extends beyond TV too. The cast, once relatively unknown, has become household names. Charlie Day has starred in Hollywood blockbusters. Glenn Howerton has led major TV projects. Caitlin Olsen has become one of the most respected comedic actresses in the industry. And Rob McElhenney, not only did he get absolutely shredded for no reason, he also bought a Premier League football team with Ryan Reynolds, proving that somehow, in real life, he's actually nothing like Mac. But despite all their individual success, they've never left Sunny behind, because this isn't just a show to them. It's something they built from the ground up, something that still matters. That's why, after all these years, they keep coming back. And so do we. As long as there are schemes to hatch, drinks to be poured, and lives to ruin, the gang will keep finding new ways to sink even lower. And as long as they do, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia will remain one of the most daring, fearless, and downright funniest shows to ever exist. So as you close your eyes tonight, imagine yourself in the dimly lit, questionably sanitary halls of Paddy's pub. The neon sign flickers, the floors are sticky, and somewhere in the background, Frank is hatching a terrible plan. The gang will be here tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, stuck in their endless cycle of failure. And honestly, we wouldn't want it any other way. Thank you for spending your evening with Lost at 3 a.m. Sleep well, and we'll see you next time.